Hi everyone, in today's video we're going to code a convolutional neural net using JAX and Flax. We will test this convolutional neural net using CPOT10 dataset. So let's start coding. So here is the notebook I'm working on. First, I would like to acknowledge the help of these three references. I borrowed the convolutional neural net architecture from Flax examples. They have multiple examples in a Flax GitHub repository, so I picked the one with the MNIST library. I borrowed the CNN architecture from there, and I tried to apply it on a CVA dataset imported using torchvision. So the example didn't use torchvision. In my example, I'm using torchvision here. I'm borrowing this CNN architecture. So this is the architecture I'm using in my notebook. The second reference, I borrowed the CPOT10 pre-processing code from this GitHub repository. The reason why I'm using a specific code to pre-process CVA dataset, I'm trying to avoid the error that I ran into in my last video, which is the pre-processing provided by torchvision actually swapped the dimensions for the images. So I'm using a dedicated pre-processing code just to ensure that these images are converted into JAX arrays without swapping the dimensions. The last reference is this course from Stanford. It's called Deep Learning for Computer Vision. It was very useful for me to understand the CNN architecture. So they have the layer patterns, they have these use cases here, case studies. They have LeNet, AlexNet, GoogleNet, VGGNet. They used a very nice chronological order for these CNN architectures, so it was very easy for me to understand. These are the two references. This is the main reference in convolutional neural nets, and this is for the Flax GitHub repository. I'm importing some libraries, and here the parameters. I'm setting the image size to 32, I'm setting the batch size to 128, and this means a standard deviation. I'm using these just to normalize the images between these desired values. And I'm using crop scales and crop ratios just to perform data augmentation before training. Data augmentation is a fancy word for changing images. So basically, data augmentation, we are changing images just to add some diversity to the training set and make it as different as possible from the testing set, just to challenge the method. Hopefully, it will generalize to more unseen data. So this is the purpose of data augmentation. Here is the architecture of the CNN network I'm using. I'll explain it in details here. So first, this is our first batch, which is of size 128 images. These are CPOT10 images, which are 32 by 32 by 3 channels. Color images, and the 3 channels are RGB channels for all the 128 images. First, we are performing convolutional layer. The features equal 32. Features is the number of filters, number of convolutional filters that we are passing across images. So instead of 3 channels, we will end up with 32 channels representing the convolutional filters. But if you are like me, coming from PyTorch, it doesn't make sense to pass an image of 32 by 32 through a convolutional layer. Then you are getting the same size again, which is 32 by 32. Using PyTorch, the image size will be reduced after passing a convolutional layer. But here is the reason. The convolutional layer we are using is the flax.linen conv. And if you look into the documentation of this layer, you will find that padding equals same. And if you go to convolutional layer in PyTorch, you will find that padding equals 0. And there is a note down here. Padding equals valid is the same as no padding. So by setting padding to 0, basically PyTorch is selecting padding equals valid. So Flax by default uses padding equals same, and PyTorch by default uses padding equals valid. I got my notes here to explain the difference between padding equals valid and padding equals same. For example, if we have a 5 by 5 image and the kernel size is 3 by 3, the kernel is the convolutional filter. So if we are passing this filter across the image, there are only 3 positions that this filter can fit in. So this is the first position, which is I highlighted here in bold. A second position, if we slide it by 1 pixel here. A third position will be if it reaches the end of the image, and that's it. Only 3 positions. And for each of these positions, we are performing dot product, and we're adding the values of the convolution, and we are getting this pixel here, and this pixel here, and this pixel here. So in total, we're getting 3 by 3. This is padding equals valid. By default in PyTorch, if we pass an image through a convolutional layer, it will get smaller and smaller and smaller because of this option, padding equals valid. But padding equals same, I don't know if you can see here, but the pixels on the border of the image are in red. These are the padding. The original image is 5 by 5, 5 by 5. So what we have done here, we're padding the image with zeros, and we are starting the filter from the top left corner of the image. And by sliding this filter, there are 5 positions. As a result, we will get the same as the original image, which is 5 by 5. So the input is 5 by 5 and the output is 5 by 5. If we set the padding to same, which is the default option in Flax, but if we set padding to valid, the image will be reduced. So this is the difference between padding equals valid and padding equals same. So this padding equals valid is the default option in PyTorch, and this padding equals same is the default option in Flax. So this is the difference between the 2 libraries. Let's continue on the architecture of our CNN. So by performing convolution with the 32 filters, we are getting 128 images, each of which has 32 by 32 by 32. With these 32, this is the 3rd dimension, which has the convolutional filters. Then we are performing average pooling. The window shape is 2 by 2, and the strides are 2 by 2. So we are passing the 2 by 2 window across the image. Basically, what we are doing here, we are reducing the size of the image to half. So instead of 32 by 32, we are ending up with 16 by 16 for all the 128 images. After performing average pooling, we are passing the images through another convolutional layer, which this time has 64 filters. So we will get 16 by 16 by 64 images for all 120 images in the batch. Then we are performing average pooling with the same size as before, which is reducing the size of the image by half. Instead of 16 by 16, we are getting 8 by 8. Then after that, we're performing reshape. Reshape, x.reshape, the first parameter is x.shape 0 minus 1. So what is x-shape? X-shape is actually 128 by 8 by 8 by 64. The first dimension is the batch dimension. Second dimension is the height of the image. The third dimension is the width of the image. The fourth dimension is the depth of the image, which is the convolutional filters. So we are reshaping to a 2-dimensional array. We are telling JAX that the first dimension equals x.shape 0, which is 128, which is the first dimension, the batch dimension. Basically, we are instructing JAX to figure out the size of this dimension from the remaining dimensions. So the remaining dimensions are 8 by 8 by 64. And we are telling JAX it's minus 1. You figure it out yourself. So what JAX will do, it will keep the first dimensions because we just told it to do that. The second dimension will be automatically determined by JAX by multiplying the height of the image by the width of the image by the depth of the image, which is the convolutional filters. This will be 4096. So before applying multi-layer perceptron, we are getting a 2-dimensional array of size 128 by 4096. Then we are passing that through a dense layer, which is a linear layer in Flax, with 256 neurons to get a 2-dimensional array of 128 by 256. The last layer is a linear layer of size 10 neurons to get an array of size 128 by 10. And if we take softmax on this array, this gives us a probability of each class. Next step is to load the cPython dataset from torchvision. So here I am calling torchvision.dataset.cPython, and I'm calling the train split by setting the train parameter equals true, and I'm calling the validation set to be the same as training set, and I'm using the split between the train. I'm using 45,000 images for the training split and 5,000 images for the validation split, and I'm calling the test split by setting the train parameter to false. The train split, I'm performing train transform which basically randomly flips the images and randomly crop images and convert them to NumPy. Image to NumPy is this function here. It basically converts the image into np.float32 and normalize the values between the means and standard deviations we set at the beginning of this notebook. On the test split, I'm not performing any data augmentation, no flipping or cropping. I'm just converting the images into NumPy. Then I'm creating data loader for the train dataset, for the validation dataset, and for the test dataset. I'm checking the link, 45,000 images for the train data loader. The number of batches is 351. And if we divide the number of images by the size of, by how many images in a single batch, we will end up with a 351.5. But I only have 351 batches, and I'm dropping the last batch for training. For testing, I'm keeping all the batches. The size of the batch is 128 by 32, which is the height of the image, 32 width of the image, and 3 is the depth of the image. And the float 64 is the data type for the images, and int64 for the labels. I'm initializing the model to be of CNN class. The optimizer, I set it to optax.adam. Then I am initializing the parameters with a random array here of this size. Then I'm creating the model state needed by Flax to train the model. These 3 cells for the training, but let's start from this cell here. To train model, I'm passing model state, which I initialized before, then a train loader, and I'm setting the number of books to 100. In the train model, I'm calling train epoch with the state and train data loader. In the train epoch, for one epoch, I'm setting an empty list for the loss, an empty list for the accuracy, and for all the batches in the data loader, which I'm passing here to the train data loader, I'm extracting the images, I'm extracting the labels, and I'm calling apply model with the state, with the images, and with the labels. Apply model has a function here called loss function. It passes the images with the parameters to the model to get the logits, and it computes the one-hot encoding for the images, and it computes the cross entropy between the logits and the one-hot encoding, which is the true labels. It returns the loss and logits. So if I get here inside the apply model, I will set the grad function to the loss function, and it has auxiliary parameter, which is the logits here. It doesn't return only the loss, it returns the loss and the logits. So I'm getting the loss and logits from the grad function and the gradients, and I'm computing the accuracy. So apply model will return the gradients, the loss, and the accuracy. Coming back here, the state equals update model with the state and the gradient we're getting from apply model. So update model here will call state.apply gradients with the gradients that we computed from apply model function. So we will append the loss for this batch, we will append the accuracy for this batch. At the end of the for loop, which is the end of the epoch, we are computing the training loss and the training accuracy, and we're returning those alongside the state here. And for each epoch, we are printing the number of the epoch, the loss function, and the train accuracy. So by training the CNN for 100 epochs, we are getting 88% on CFR10 dataset. For testing, we are setting empty list for loss and accuracy. We are looping over the test loader. We are extracting the images and labels, and we are performing apply model. We don't need the gradient. We only need the loss and accuracy, which we are appending to these lists and printing at the end of the testing. So for the testing, we are getting 72% on testing CFR10 dataset using the CNN architecture. The confusion matrix, I'm looping again over the test data loader. I'm extracting the labels and images, and I'm getting the logits, and I'm getting the reduction labels by taking the maximum element across the row for each sample, just to see which is the predicted class for this sample, for this image. Then I'm appending the batch labels, which are the true labels and the predicted labels. And here I'm flattening out all the labels to be one-dimensional NumPy vector needed for the confusion matrix. And I'm passing for the confusion matrix display This is a function from scikit-learn. I'm passing the labels, the prediction labels, and I'm sending the display labels to classes, which is a list we defined earlier with 10 classes. And I'm setting the axis to be the axis that I just defined here of size 8 by 8. So this is the convolution matrix after training this CNN architecture for 100 epochs on C410 dataset. So this experiment, just to explain how we can apply convolutional neural nets on JAX and Flax. Of course, you can increase the accuracy by trying different things. The first thing I would do is just to increase the number of epochs. By increasing the number of epochs, I think we will get more accuracy. But anyway, C410 dataset is just for experimental purposes, just to test it on JAX and Flax to see how things goes and how we can apply jitter operation on Flax. I guess that's it, guys, for today's video. If you find this video helpful, please like and subscribe. By the way, you can find a link to the notebook I'm working on in the description below. Thanks for watching. Bye.